Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia, and I am a career coach and strategist with over 10 years of experience helping ambitious professionals like you find clarity in who you are and helping you align your values and preferences to your career. This podcast is just one of many ways that I share my knowledge, strategies, and experience with you. And if you check out my podcast page on my website, I have all the seasons organized and easily accessible to find what you need. Along with the podcast, I also have multiple courses, resources, and I offer one-on-one customized career coaching that covers career exploration, career management, and career advancement. So head on over to ridethetidecollective.com to check it all out. This season, as you know, is all about controlling your career, and I'm sharing the process that I created to help you get started on controlling your career without the investment of, a big coaching package that you might not need at this point. And this episode is all about taking action toward your goals, hence the name, Initiate Action. This is phase 4 in the process, and it takes what you outlined primarily in phase 3, where we talked about our different goals, holistic and career, and we start to put them into action. So in the formal program, you would take about 4 sessions within the 12 sessions of the program to execute specifically outlined actions toward your goal with my support. So I'm there to help you strategize, debrief, and hold you accountable. And at the end of those sessions, we do a big debrief to figure out what the next steps are. And I'll actually share some of those debrief questions at the end of this episode. And since taking action toward your goal is a very specific thing to your goals that you outlined, what I wanted to do in this episode is take 3 of the main career goals that I see, and I've mentioned them multiple times throughout this season, and outline some actions that you can take if you happen to be in one of these common situations. So if you've also been to my website, you'll notice that my resources are outlined using these 3 options as well. And that's because generally everybody falls into one of them when it comes to career. So I will be going through the basic actions for career exploration, career management, and career advancement. So let's start with career exploration. One thing to note about career exploration is that when you are well into your career, so more of our mid-career professionals, the exploration process looks different than when you first graduated college. You've had positions, you've worked a few places, you've experienced different bosses. You have information to start with versus starting with limited information. So even if you are somebody that feels completely and totally lost, you still have a bank of information that we can start with that's going to give us some immediate information about you, right? And preferences and things like that. Your experience plays a big part in what you want to explore. Exploration can be as simple as looking for a new organization or as complicated as completely overhauling your career path, which I will say there's a time component to both of those that you want to be aware of. Looking for a new organization isn't going to take nearly as much time as completely overhauling your career path. So here are some good questions to ask yourself if you're in an exploratory phase. Are you looking for a new industry? Are you looking for a new function? As I said, are you looking for a new company? Is it more about the next step in your functional area, in your path, and you're not quite sure what that's going to look like? Are you looking for something completely new all around, right? Get clear about what is making you want to explore and why. And regardless of what you're interested in exploring, The name of the game is research. So, how you research will depend on your own preferences for taking in information and your personality. So some people, they need a lot of details to make a decision. Some people will take in minimal information and act more on instinct. Some people will want to speak with professionals in spaces that they're interested in. And some people would prefer to read articles or watch videos and basically anything other than talk to somebody about it. So, what is your preferred way to research? There is no right or wrong answer here. It's really about what works best for you. And I know, a lot of times when people give advice out there, oh, do this, do this, do this, that might work really well for them, but you have to consider your own personality, your own comfort level, and figure out a way to research that's going to work best for you. So from here, what you research obviously depends on how you answer those questions that I asked just a bit ago. And one thing I will say, professional associations are one of the main sources of information and research for industries and functional areas. So that's where I would start, because you're going to get the most up-to-date information generally from professional associations. There are usually events you can attend if you want more of that human interaction piece. But they also will have a lot of written information there if you don't want to do that. They usually have statistics, job openings. A lot of times they have their own job boards. They'll have trends to help you figure out, if it's a good fit for you, if that career path is a good fit for you. It's a really helpful resource that I think some people forget about. So look up those professional associations. From there, don't underestimate the power of a good online search. You will likely find articles and blogs and videos and other information to help you research whatever path you're on. Just make sure that the information you're reading is from reputable sources with authority to speak on the topic that you're researching. Opinions are fine, but you need to take it with a grain of salt, because a lot of times when somebody has a really harsh opinion about an industry or a functional area, it's because of their personal experience. It's still good to read because there is usually some truth to it, but you want to make sure that you're reading multiple perspectives. Once you've done your research and you figured out where you want to go next, you'll want to create your goals and your plan to get there. Because of the nature of career exploration, you're likely going to be headed into a season of job searching. So this is a situation where your initial goal is likely career exploration. Then once you figure that out, you have a new set of goals toward, okay, how do I get there? Right? So it's kind of like a goal stacking situation. You got to solve one before you solve the other, right? So just keep that in mind. Next, we have career management. So this is that second goal that we're likely to see. And I love working with clients who are in a season of managing their careers, because they are usually focused on problem solving and growth, which are two of my specialties. Career management can look a lot like starting a new position, usually at a new company, and wanting to make sure that you are approaching it well, as well as dealing with any lingering behaviors or mindsets from a previous role, especially if you're carrying over some toxicity from a previous situation. It can also look like managing a situation that you aren't able to leave yet, or maybe you're just struggling in a couple of areas and you want to just have a second opinion for that. You want help just managing those specific cases. In some cases, career management is stepping up to make an impact or to reach a goal within reasonable expectations of the position. So sometimes I see this happen more when people have maybe a lot of life things going on that are impacting their career, or they have an absent manager and they need somebody like externally to just help them like talk through things and figure things out. Um, and just help them get to where they want to be in their specific career path. And then sometimes career management is situational. So it might be managing a transition or working with a new team or being on a new project and struggling through that. So that's also why I created the career action coaching package, which is 3 sessions, because I realized sometimes you don't need a 12 session program. Sometimes you need 3 sessions to figure out what's immediately going on, and you're good and you go from there. So anyway, I'll link that into the blog post if you want to know more about that, but that's a really great option if you just want something really tailored for a specific situation. So what does action look like when it's about career management? Well, similar to career exploration, it depends on what you're trying to manage, but ultimately it boils down to 3 things: awareness, responsibility, and behavior. So you need to be aware of the situation that you're trying to manage. It seems simple enough, but really, you need to be aware of all of the components of the situation. So remember back in phase 1 where I discussed realistic reality? This applies here. What is realistically happening in this situation that you need to manage? What is within your control to manage? This leads to responsibility. What are you responsible for in the situation versus someone else? Or are you being impacted by a system you can't control? For example, let's talk supervisors. This is one of the main career management topics that I see over and over again. A professional who is struggling with their manager. Now, in many cases, blame is either placed solely on the manager or solely on the professional, depending on what side you're standing on. When in reality, it is likely a combination of both people and a broken system. Okay, a broken system. We will talk about that. So let's say that you have a manager who's really good at their functional position and they get promoted to manager. This happens very frequently, but they don't receive any management training. Maybe you're new to your position and you need more guidance than you've been receiving, and your preference is to have some direct feedback. Not only are you dealing with a manager who likely has never managed people before, they haven't received any training, and they are likely mimicking a management style that they have received in the past, which can be great or not so great. And while you might be waiting for them to ask you about your preferences and learn how to manage you best, that likely won't happen right away, right? It is in your best interest to voice your needs and to manage up until your manager receives training, feedback, or acclimates to their position. Okay. And in some cases, that might not happen. It just might not. And just as an aside, not all of these situations become toxic. Some people do acclimate into their position, they get it, they hear what you're asking, and it works out fine. When it becomes toxic is when we have prolonged issues without intervention, without feedback, and there's no way for the manager to change their behavior, or they're not willing to. And so now it's reoccurring, and now it becomes toxic for everyone around them. Okay. So obviously that's an example. That is an example based on not only my own situation, but multiple clients that I have worked with. This is a very, very common situation that I see. And so how you manage it, it looks different. Remember, our last one is behavior. right? So we want to make sure that the behavior changes. And that's not the manager's behavior in this example. We have our own behavior that we have control over. We don't have control over our manager. And so even if what is happening with them is impacting you, you have a choice in how you respond. And assuming it doesn't become a toxic situation, you want to be mindful of your behavior and how what your expectations are and how you're working in the situation. So if you are in a season of career management, I want you to ask yourself this: what are the barriers within your position, and are they within your control to manage? Your control. What are your specific goals within your position, and what steps do you need to take? What steps do you need to take to get there? And then what relationships in your position need to be repaired or cultivated? So sometimes we know that something's going on, and these questions help us dig into what actually needs to be managed. I have found that most people who are in a season of career management, it's relationships. It very rarely has to do with their own ability to execute their job and figure out goals. It does happen, but it's much more rare. It is usually relationships with a manager, with coworkers. Sometimes it's the culture of the organization, but I would say relationships are at the top of the list there. So think about if there are relationships that need to be repaired or need to be cultivated. If they are past the point of no return, then you need to figure out if that's a situation or relationship that's going to impact you at some point. Because if it is, or if it has any bearing on how you're perceived in the organization, you got to deal with it. Because you don't want somebody out there talking negatively about you. It will impact what you're able to do and where you're able to go within the organization. If you are truly in a toxic situation, trying to manage what's happening will likely be futile. There comes a point where you have to take the steps to leave. If you're there, I would suggest listening to the podcast season, Should I Quit My Job? It was season 1. It's linked on the podcast page. It walks you through a really good process to help you figure out for sure if it's time to leave, and gives a lot of tips on what to do and how to manage in that situation. So I'll link that down in the into the blog post, but highly recommend that if you are in a toxic situation, because you will want to take the steps to leave. Finally, career advancement. So more commonly, this would be a job search, but I use career advancement because there are a lot of different ways you can advance in your career, and it's not always specific to job search. But this is what most career coaches are known for assisting with. It's getting you to that next position. So first, you need to decide if there are opportunities within your current organization to move up. So this can come by getting a promotion or moving into a new area of the organization if you want to stay. The other option is to switch organizations completely, but likely in a similar functional area, right? So I want to go through some of the actions that you will want to focus on regardless of the situation that you're in. These are some general job search things that you're going to want to go through, because even if you're applying within an organization, you still have to have the position. You still need to apply for it if it's a different team or different department. If it's a promotion, it's really easy. You're not going to have to do all this stuff. If it's a promotion, you just get promoted. But if you're moving within an organization, you will have some similar steps in terms of application, interview, all of that. Okay, so first you need to be clear about where you're headed. And sometimes this is where career exploration and career advancement can really go hand in hand, because once you explore, you're likely going to go through the advancement process. But you want to be clear about where you're headed before you start down the job search path, right? Because if you're not clear, you're going to end up applying to like 100 different positions, and that is not helpful. So be really clear about what is going to be next for you. If your industry uses LinkedIn, which most industries do, I would say on the knowledge worker side, update your LinkedIn profile. Cannot stress that enough. Update your profile to reflect your accomplishments and language that matches where you're headed, where you want to go. So you're going to have to shift some language around. I do have all of this in a course if you need additional direction or more step by step. So I'll link that into the blog post as well. Also, update your resume. Even for internal positions, you will need to have an updated resume that is tailored to the type of position that you're looking for, essentially the functional area that you're looking for. You do not have to create a resume for every single position. If you are applying for jobs within a specific job family, then you shouldn't have to make major shifts. The requirements should be fairly similar. If you have a couple different job families that you're applying to, then you will have to make some changes and have a couple different versions. And then networking. So whether this is like, whether you're going internal or external, networking is a must, right? Because I don't know, I don't want to have to submit hundreds of resumes, and I don't think you do either. And networking really helps cut that down, because you're learning information about companies, positions, you're making that connection to help get you to the front of the pack, essentially. Internally, you still need to network, right? Because you need to make sure that you have a good reputation and you're able to make a shift or get a promotion when you want to and when it makes the most sense. And then finally, continue through with the application process, right? So your resume gets you the interview. A lot of people put way too much focus on the resume. The resume is there to get you the interview. Your interview is what gets you the job. So put equal weight onto the resume as the interview process, and make sure that you're doing your prep on the interview side once you get to that point as well. So obviously this phase is extremely customized. And especially within the program, everything is very, very customized to what my clients need and to your specific situation. But I hope that one of these three scenarios at least resonated with where you're at and with what some of your career goals might be at this point. So as I mentioned in the beginning, debriefing is one of the main components of phase 4, because we want to make sure that we learn from what we're doing so that we're not repeating things that aren't helpful for us, right? So here are some questions that I like to ask clients as we're going through all these different actions toward our goals. Which actions were easy to accomplish, right? Which came very naturally that you were excited to do and you were excited to execute on? That becomes really helpful because we see where you're getting energy within the process, and we can funnel more into that versus an area that you might hate doing. What barriers did you encounter? So I keep this really generic because the barrier could be you. The barrier could be external. It could be something else. So were the barriers within your control or outside of your control, and outlining that? Because if it's within your control, then we're going to have a conversation about that. If it's outside your control, then we're going to, reframe the situation and go, okay, well, that's not really something you can control, so let's not dwell on it, right? And once you figure out your barriers, that's when we're going to start problem solving, right? So again, this will be specific to each situation and each person, but you definitely want to figure that out so that you can then go, okay, how do I want to proceed moving forward? And what adjustments do I want to make in my approach or the goals that I've already, goals and actions that I've already set forth? We might want to make some adjustments there. All right. So, what is the action for this episode? I mean, the title of this episode and this phase is about initiating action. So, my hope is that you've identified where you're at and what needs to happen for you to move forward. If you've done that, start working through the actions that you've identified specifically for your situation. And don't forget to debrief. So, thank you so much for listening. If you have made it all the way to the end of this episode, I would like to give you a gift, especially because I feel like this episode is where you're likely going to figure out, are you moving forward into a new position? Are you managing your current situation? And I recently released a resume guide for mid-career professionals. And so if you find yourself in a place where you need to work on your resume, this is a guide that will take you through all the steps and is recruiter endorsed. So I had some of my recruiter friends look it over, give me some feedback, and I made some changes. And it's going to walk you through everything that you need to write a really great resume. Use the code 5OFFPODCAST to take $5 off the already insanely good deal of $37. Also, this is a special one only for this episode. If you message me on LinkedIn and let me know that you listened to this specific episode, I will give you a code to get $50 off my LinkedIn course and coaching. So this is a comprehensive course that walks you through how to write your profile, how to connect with people, and gives you scripts and content to be able to use, along with how to become a thought leader, and complete with a really extensive list of topics to get you started. This option also includes 2 hours of coaching. It's a really, really amazing deal. If you've wanted to coach with me, but you want a little bit extra thrown into it, highly recommend this course. But yeah, message me on LinkedIn and I will get you that code. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.